If you've been wanting to put on muscle mass, but make sure that you're not putting on body fat, what would be the right approach? Let's take a look. When it comes to putting on lean muscle mass, it's not as complicated as the internet likes to make it out to be. There's essentially three things that you want to focus on. First and foremost, you have to break the tissue down. Number two, you have to feed it amino acids. And number three, you've got to give it enough time to actually recover in the form of sleep. So let's kind of zoom out a little bit further and look at those three subjects separately. When you're looking at the first subject of breaking the tissue down, this is where, again, I feel the internet has a tendency to overcomplicate the simplistic. When we talk about breaking the muscle tissue down, this does not mean that you have to lift a ridiculous amount of weight and run the risk of injuring yourself. You have to keep in mind that muscles are attached to the bone via tendons. And if the tendons don't have an opportunity to develop in what we refer to as tensile strength, you could literally rip the attachment of the muscle off the bone. Same thing that applies to ligaments. Ligaments attach bones to bones. So when you're doing incremental load, the tendons and the ligaments, the durability of those increase in relatively a linear fashion. When we're looking at the idea of, well, how would we want to break the tissue down? Let's stop and think about what that really means. Breaking the tissue down means you're taking the muscle fiber filaments and you're exposing them to enough load that the tissue actually starts to tear and separate ever so slightly. Now, this is where you notice your body weight in the morning will be elevated as a sign of inflammation associated with tearing down the muscle tissue. That's normal. So when we're looking at how do we stimulate the muscle to grow, you have to break it down. You could do that by lifting the same amount of weight, adding more reps to the amount of weight. Now, before you guys leave any nasty comments below, the thing that I want you to keep in mind is if you're dealing with an injury, you don't need to be trying to go and lift a tremendous amount of a load. The human muscle itself is just essentially adding up how much weight have we moved. How many different ways can we lift 100 pounds? 25 times, 20 times, right? At the end of the day, the muscle knows, okay, I've lifted X amount of load. Now, we could get down an entire bunny trail and do a separate video on the benefits of lifting heavy and stimulating hormones. Again, I'm not naive to how that works, but we have to look at it from the standpoint, what's the healthiest way? Well, the only way we can answer that is where are you at personally? If you have no pre-existing injuries and you've got a lot of background lifting weights, yes, you could do something a little bit more load bearing. But even then there's a point of diminishing returns where the risk of injury supersedes the ability to break the tissue down and get the muscle growth that you're desperately looking for. Once we break the muscle tissue down, you've got to recognize that the muscles are like a dry sponge. They're clamoring for amino acids. That's what rebuilds muscle tissue. You find that in your protein sources. And it's clamoring for sugar. So that's why we always say, if you have followed me for any period of time, you know that we own a company known as Energy Fuel. Energy Fuel is specifically designed so that you can literally absorb carbohydrates in a very easy way. The design of the molecule of the carbohydrate is very specific. If the molecule is too complex, your body won't absorb it as efficiently. The reason why that's important is when you're working out and you're putting the muscle under a tremendous amount of load, you're going to consume electrolyte, sugar, and you're going to lose a lot of water through sweat. That's the whole genesis behind the Energy Fuel, is making sure that you can keep those three levels in the system optimized, so that way it increases the output of your workout. When you're done with your workout, the body wants amino acids and it wants sugar. So that's where the recovery fuel comes in. Energy fuel during, recovery fuel afterwards. It's not a sales pitch on the product. I want you to understand the science behind it. The recovery fuel has easily digestible amino acids and sugar. Those come into the system very, very quickly because the muscles are extremely dry. From an analogy standpoint, like a sponge. There's an enzyme known as the glycogen synthase enzyme. Don't let that be intimidating whatsoever. It's an enzyme that gets activated when the muscles are being used. And when you start to take in those liquid calories as soon as you're finished, they literally absorb into the muscle tissue that much quicker, which then speeds up recovery gives the body what it needs to start the recovery process. Muscles grow, you recover quicker for the next day. So we've looked at the two. You have to load the tissue, you have to feed it, and then we have to look at the incredible power of sleep. When you go, pardon me, when you go to your Garmin dashboard, go and look at your sleep ratios. When you go to your sleep ratios, you want to look at 3 variables. What is your total number of sleep, total number of hours, ideally 8, preferably 9, and then what's the ratio of deep sleep to the awake time? Now, this does not mean that REM doesn't matter. REM rejuvenates your brain. Deep sleep is where your body releases the hormones such as human growth hormone, HGH, and testosterone. 2 very, very powerful hormones that facilitate recovery. So stop and think about this. I would say 99% of the people watching this video understand you have to work the tissue to build muscle. That's a given. What they have a tendency to miss is the food, and if they nail the food, they still may not understand the importance of sleep. You put all those 3 together, you're going to be melting body fat through HGH and testosterone. You're going to be recovering the muscle tissue from the inside out after you give it the right ratio of load. Now again, the right ratio of load is based off of your history. This is why it's so incredibly important that you just don't go and download someone's workout and then try to jump in. Do you have the functional range of motion to do that exercise? Do you have the history in the background to be able to handle that exercise? So for example, box hops are much more demanding on the human body than a walking lunge. So this is what's gotten some companies into class action lawsuits, when they just encourage people that are relatively overweight, start doing box hops, and then it blows out their knees and their lower back. That's why they had a class action lawsuit brought against them. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video and educating yourself. I don't want you to go too far too quick. That doesn't mean I'm holding you back. I'm just trying to keep you void of an injury. If you're new to this channel, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. Please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. We do put out a video every day here on YouTube answering your questions. And should you have a question of any sort, please feel free to send it to me. We promise we'll get it answered eventually. You can send me all emails to contact@coachrobb.com. Like I said, we put a new one out every day, so it's my hope that we'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks for watching.